Hi everybody, it's Gigabeef here, and today we're going to be looking at modding the ADAR, everybody's favourite beginner 5.56 weapon. By the time we're finished, we'll be taking an ADAR that looks a little bit like this, and we'll be turning it into a weapon like this, and explaining how it all fits together. The ADAR has always had a mixed opinion from the player base, and I believe that it's primarily down to bad starting ammo and difficulty in modding that puts people off. That was certainly the case for myself. However, the flexibility of the weapon is actually one of its greatest strengths, and it has made me fall in love with the weapon over the last couple of months. So stick around and let's get going. Alright, so let's talk ADARs. Everybody comes across these as soon as they start playing Tarkov, as scouts frequently spawn with them. This makes them very common, which is great as it makes the base gun super cheap on the flea market. I would still recommend AKs for newer players, and especially the 7.62 models, firstly because they're so much cheaper and easier to mod, and the basic ammo is actually really good for the price. Also, many of the good attachments for ADARs are locked to fairly high trader levels, which can make it hard to get started early. To prove the point about 5.56's awful starter ammo, in this clip here I found out later that I was getting hit with M855 whilst wearing a half beaten up level 5 Tactec and a level 4 Bastion helmet that I picked up off a guy. I even get hit in the back of the head and managed to walk away. However, some people swear by the ADAR, and there is some good reason why, especially at the intermediate level. When thinking guns, as always we have to think about the ammo and penetration values first, as that is what really matters. In June 2020, Battlestate upped the damage and pen of the M855A1, which is the second best ammo in the game for 5.56 weapons. Both Peacekeeper and Skier sell it for either 300 rubles or $2.06 per round. The screen lies, by the way, it's not $3 a shot. This makes it both spammable and actually kills people. It's just got that edge over BT rounds for 5.45 in the level 5 armor category that makes it hit that sweet spot. While BS for 5.45 is quite a bit better, it is also 3 times the price. With this change, I'm a convert to 5.56 for routine builds. On to the modding. AR-15 platform guns are quite a bit more complex than AKs when it comes to how the pieces fit together. This can be a bit of a nightmare when getting started due to how the linked search works on the flea market. Let's start with the base piece down here. I've laid out the parts to show exactly where the linkages come from. We have our ADAR lower as the start that everything else connects to. This takes a charging handle, and an upper receiver and a stock or pistol grip depending on exactly the configuration that you're looking at. We'll talk about this more in a moment. Next, both the barrel and the handguard fit onto the upper, and naturally foregrips will fit onto the handguard, which obviously doesn't come with a stock ADAR. Finally, the gas tubes and any compensators will fit onto the barrel. Very usefully, all of the ADAR type upper receivers have a Picatinny rail on top, which means there's no messing around with side mounts or bastions like on the AKs. Quick 5 seconds before we continue, please don't forget to subscribe if you want to see more content like this in the future. It really does help to build the channel. Alright, let's continue. Stocks and muzzle devices are generally the most important mods in Tarkov for stats per ruble, so we'll start here. The vast array of stocks for the ADAR is honestly quite overwhelming. Let's just pop into the flea market quickly by using the linked search and navigating down to stocks and chassis here. There are 2 broad categories of how this goes down, which are the stocks that directly attach to the base weapon, and then there's others which have a buffer tube of some kind in between the lower and the stock itself. There's also one series of stocks, the MOE carbine, that take a butt pad at the end as well, so that's 3 layers of mods in potential. You then also have some stocks that come inbuilt as a stock pistol grip combo, and others that need a separate pistol grip to go with the stock itself. The first thing that I'd like to point out here is that none of the direct stocks are really any good for our budget build. The absolute best stock that we can get here is the Hera Arms stock, which does make you look like you're fighting aliens and Starship Troopers, but it can be quite expensive, so when the flea market's not selling off down here, it does normally cost around 40,000 rubles, which for admittedly decent stats is still a bit too expensive. We should compare everything to the base M4 stock, which is ironically called the high standard stock, which has 32% recoil reduction and 3 ergo. The CQB here is minus 39% and 18 ergo, but at 40k it's too much, which we'll see in a second. Outside of this, the rest are a little bit mediocre. This is because of the way that buffer tubes work. The base ADAR tube doesn't actually give you anything, but a few points of ergo. However, the Colt buffer tube from the M4 gives minus 1% recoil for 1000 rubles, and the SI Advanced tube gives minus 4% for 10k. This means that if we opt for the SI, we get a head start on recoil reduction when we're adding stocks to the back. Now if we go ahead and link search this here, we end up with an even bigger list of buffer tube stocks, and again we have mega choice. Some of these are just adapters for other guns due to how the linked search works, so we can ignore these, and then out of the remainder I'll point out a few contenders. Let's start with my favourite, which is the MFT bus stock. This thing gives minus 39% recoil and 1 ergo for $76 or 9,000 rubles equivalent. This is mental in my opinion, and with the buffer tube we get to minus 43% recoil reduction. There's literally only one other stock that gets the same level here, which is the HK-E1, and the only difference is it has 2 more ergo and costs 3k more. If you want a little bit more ergo, the MOE carbines are not bad, as these are the ones that mentioned earlier that do actually have an extra space for a butt pad on the back, which gives an additional 3% recoil reduction and 1 extra ergo for a total of minus 38 and plus 8 ergo for approximately 12k. Not something I really do to be honest, but if you're going really hard down the ergo route, the Magpul PRS Gen 3 is actually not a bad choice. The recoil is quite a lot worse at minus 34%, but it has a crazy ergo of 16 and it only costs about 15k normally. We're going to use the SI and the bus for our build. Given that we've chosen a stock with no pistol grip, we need to go and get one separately. These only affect ergonomics, and so usually a nice middle ground on these is the Hogue overmolded rubber line. You can choose your colour, and for plus 9 ergo, which is over 4 over base, this is only 3,000 rubles, and I think it's quite decent value. Next we're going to skip up to muzzle devices, just because they're so important. We're going to link to search on the barrel, which is where you're going to find these. So if we drop down into the functional mods, down into muzzle devices, and into flash eyes and brakes, because we're going to be going for that, minimising the recoil. In classic AR-15 style, muzzles are also a little bit more complicated. Here we're going to make it easy on ourselves. There are 2 broad types, some which are standalone muzzles that fit to the barrel and that's it, and other ones which are 2-stage compensator/suppressors, both parts of which give recoil reduction. Given that we're going for value, the PWS CQB is the clear winner in this category, with minus 10% recoil for only 11,000 rubles, which we'll be using. The base compensator for the ADAR gives minus 5%, so this is a pretty good improvement. For comparison, the best combo in this category is the Daniels Defense muzzle brake with minus 7, and then also the suppressor which has another minus 7 on top of that. So this way we can get minus 14% overall, but this is quite expensive because both together it costs about 55,000. The Surefire combos are another choice, they can give up to about 13% for around 33k, flea market depending, but we're going to stick away these suppressors for now. Just for reference, the lowest recoil build actually does something different, using the SAI handguard and a special attachment called the jailbreak. I'll cover this one in another video, but as you can imagine, it's quite expensive. Next up we're going to look at receivers, and these fit onto the base piece of the weapon that we're looking at. So there's only a couple of these, so at least it's a little bit easier. So here the ADAR and M4 receivers give no benefit at all, the Noveske at 27,000 and the TX15 at 13,000 give minus 2 recoil, and the VLTOR gives 36k for minus 5%. The VL and the FX are the best value per ruble for recoil, so unless you want ergo, in which the Noveske gives plus 13 versus the ADAR's base 4, the other two are better. However, at 7k per recoil point, it's a little expensive for a budget build. We're just going to leave it as stock for now. Right, so next up we're going to talk about gas blocks a little bit. These don't actually do anything for recoil, and some of them give a little bit more ergo than others, but the main point here is that the original M4 front sight has this really high part on it where the iron sight front is, and so you want to replace that out. This is important if you intend on using any form of decent scope. Myself, and I'm sure lots of other people, have found out to their great disappointment that this build isn't all that sensible if you actually want to hit anything with it. We're just going to grab the cheap one, which is the Mark 12 low profile. So if you go into the vital parts, away from the barrel, we go into gas blocks, you can find the Mark 12 is here. This is costing us 6,000 rubles. The best piece is the JP Enterprises 5B, which gives plus 2 ergo for 8,000 rubles, so it's really not that much more. I don't really care about the extra 2 ergo, but you can if you want. It is very cheap. On to the next one. So handguards are an interesting one. If we go through the same menu again, go down to vital parts and into handguards, there's a recurring theme here. We have loads to choose from. However, to even get 1% recoil reduction, you have to pay at least 10k. And there's only a couple with more than that, which limits it down quite quickly. Compounding on this, with a given barrel length, you can only take certain ones of these, and we're going to be using the 406 ADAR barrel because that's what came with the gun. Of the ones left, there's 2 cheap 2%ers, which is the RSAS and URX handguards at about 12k, and 2 handguards overall at 3%, which is firstly the super expensive Meta SAIQD at 40,000, or the Mark 10, which is a much more reasonable 16k. With all the handguards here, you're going to have to pay another 2k for rails to mount a foregrip, which makes the Mark 10 look even better at 19,000 for 3% recoil. Now you might be thinking approximately 6,000 per point is quite expensive, but it's basically the best value amongst the handguards, and you need to upgrade something to be able to get a foregrip onto a handguard at all. There's no super budget equivalent of the AK-100 for the ADAR, and the cheapest thing that we can actually use for around 9k, which I found on the flea, was the SMR Mark 16, and that gives no recoil reduction at all. So we're going to use the Mark 10 for our build. At this stage it's worth grabbing a laser as well. For now we'll use the NC Star as it's the cheapest at 5k and it fits onto the attachment rail alongside the foregrip. Now that we've got our Mark 10 handguard and our 10-inch guide, we can link search this and go and have a look at some foregrips. I've covered foregrips before in my AK build video, but I'll say it here again, most of foregrips suck pretty bad. I tend to use the RK0, as for 7,000 rubles you get minus 3% recoil and a few points of ergo. To jump up to the RK1, you have to pay another 10k for the extra 1% recoil reduction, which to me doesn't seem worth it. Surely Skier will run out eventually for the number of these that I buy. I wanted to touch on barrels quickly, because they're a modding option, even though I usually avoid modding the barrels of AR-15 weapons. So let's just pop down into our vital parts for a second. The standard ADAR barrel is fine to be honest, at minus 4% recoil and minus 10 ergo. It's very similar to the M4 barrel which has minus 9 ergo instead. Then there is a super short barrel for mini M4 builds with minus 2% recoil, so it's actually worse but with minus 6 ergo, and two longer barrels with minus 5% and minus 11 ergo, and minus 6% and minus 12 ergo. These are all about 20 to 30,000 and there's just no need to amend the barrel, it doesn't give us enough of a benefit, or really any benefit at all in some cases. To sum it all up, we've taken a base ADAR, added the bus stock for 9,000, an SI advanced tube for 10k, the PWS compensator for 11, the overmolded grip for 3,000, a Mark 12 gas tube for 6k, the Mark 10 handguard and guide for 19k total, an RK0 for 7,000, and an NC Star laser for 5,000. This brings us to 70k, but don't forget all the bits that we removed can be sold to mechanic for around 6. These are my recommended pieces, but if you want to slim down the cost you can pick and choose parts as you wish. There's one final mod that I want to touch on that makes the ADAR so much better. For 17,000 you can move all of this stuff from the ADAR onto the M4 lower to gain the ability to full auto. Or alternatively, you can create an M4 from an ADAR base from scratch for 30k. I think this is very much worth it as it gives you the flexibility to gun someone down at close range and has saved my life a few times. For more information on exactly how this works, see my guide above and in the description on this topic. This is the beauty of the AR platform, as there's so much cross compatibility that an ADAR build guide is kind of an M4 build guide as well. So I hope you've enjoyed this starter guide to ADARs. Remember to sub and hit the bell if you want to see more. You can also follow me on Twitter, and I stream on Twitch Wednesdays, Fridays and Saturday evenings GMT. So until then, I'll see you next time, and as always, have fun in your raids.